And when you have that seat, just checking in with how your body feels. What feels aligned? What feels like it needs to be integrated? Maybe let the eyes close. Think about the duration of each side of respiration. There's this little village with this very peculiar street. Peculiar not necessarily because of the geography or orientation, but peculiar because no one remembers when it got there, how it got there. And yet it's full of vendors that no one remembers the origin of. Restaurants, people don't know where the food came from. It's bustling. Think about those subtle little tilts to the body placement and how those shifts laterally or towards the posterior or anterior alignment can lock in the spinal column more intently. And then let's allow the chin to just subtly tilt upwards, maybe 5 to 15 degrees. A very little shift, but there's a subtle upward tilt to the chin. And then retract the scapula and draw deep, full inhales to the center of the lungs. And hold those for just a pause and then just release through the mouth. Feel the power of that inhale coming in, expanding the lungs. And then just releasing that out. And let's do that 2 or 3 more times. Eventually, there's going to come a time where you feel like you've had the right amount. Let's maintain a little awareness, integrity across the shoulder girdle, and turn our gaze towards the left. Tuck the chin to the sternum, lift the chin to the ceiling, bring the head back to neutral, neutral axis, and then neutral alignment. And we'll do the same thing to the second side. Just awareness across the shoulder girdle, a head rotation. We lift the chin, we tuck the chin, and we'll come back to neutral. One more time to the left. Head rotates. We lift the chin. We tuck the chin. Back to neutral axis. And then to the right. We'll tuck the chin. We'll lift the chin. Come back to a neutral axis and to neutral alignment. Let yourself just find your way into a forward fold. Brief little transition here. We won't be here too remarkably long. Put a little extra emphasis on the exhale side of your breath so that the exhales are elongated. And then we'll walk ourselves back up into seat. And from seat, let's extend our legs straight out in front of us. We'll have our props or prop, depending on what you were able to come up with, a blanket and a block kind of handy. Remember, if you don't have a block, no problem. We can use the blanket to create that. And then let's just exhale forward into a fold. As you start to move into this spinal flexion, pay attention to how the breath itself is interplaying with the spinal column. If you think of the breath kind of as a part of the spine, which the breath is a part of our body, the spine is a part of our body, they must be. The breath, the inhale portion of the breath has an extension energy, right? A sternum forward energy. The exhale portion of the breath, especially when we are in flexion, has a flexion energy. And so tune in to that interplay between the spine and the breath. If you can feel the release into flexion, into the expansion of the spine. That's it. Feels appropriate for you. Let's walk ourselves towards seat. Here we will determine whether we have one or two props. If we have two props, we're going to use a block as a head support. If we have two props, we can take the blanket from a shelf fold to a hot dog fold. So we end up with something roughly this approximation. If you have one prop, we'll use the blanket for the head support. So we'll take it to a towel length and then create your own version of a hot dog. So we end up with a little bit longer. So depending on your prop allocation, we're going to have a hot dog and a block or a hot dog behind us. And then lowering or aligning that prop with the length of the spine and then lowering ourselves down. The head and the spine are elevated above the sacrum. So we want the sacrum connected to the mat. And we want a lift of the spine for a very, very low back bend. Legs can be extended. The bottoms of the feet can be together. The knees can be bent. All of those shapes are appropriate. But one of them will be appropriate for you. One of the more peculiar things about this peculiar street in this little village was a vendor that sold masks. Not the style of mask you might see at Mardi Gras, or even the style of mask you might see on Halloween. These were masks that, when you put them on, transformed you. They made you into the person of the mask you placed upon your face. And for a small fee, someone with a meager, meek, and shy demeanor could buy a mask of confidence. And while they were wearing that mask, they could move through the world as a person with confidence. While we have this elevated kind of almost the entirety of the spinal column, right? Sacrum is settled at that base. Everything else is elevated. And thus, the entirety of the spine is kind of naturally pressed into extension, maybe innately pressed into extension. Can you feel back into your breath and how that inhale is impacted by the spine being an extension? How the exhale is impacted by the spine being propped into extension. Ask yourself if you're getting the full release at the tail end of the exhale. It allows for the full and complete emptying of the lungs. And then let's inhale and bring our knees into a bent shape if they're not already there, so that both kneecaps can point towards the ceiling. Really ensure that the sacrum, the entirety of the pelvic bowl, feels not only connected to the mat, but stable against the mat. So if we're just maybe 1 inch too high on the blanket, you could feel really lightly against the mat, but not stable there. Make sure you're stable. And then with that stability in mind, let's let our left knee fall out wide, and an opportunity to ensure before we set the right leg that we're still neutral against the mat at the pelvic bowl. And then you can extend your right leg into this little figure four. Arms here can be at cactus, they can be at T, they can be by your side. Note that with the extension energy across the spinal column, a lateral extension is going to put some more tension across the anterior chain. So pec minor, pec major musculature, much more involved than they would be if the spine was resting against the mat. Make sure that's right for your shoulder if that is the position you choose. These masks become more and more popular as people find more and more uses for them. A man who hates his job purchases a mask of someone who loves his work. A woman who's struggling to stay focused purchases the mask of someone completely keyed in. And word spreads and lines form. But there is one very important rule, a rule that everyone is told upon each purchase, no matter how many times they've been to the shop. The mask must be returned before sunset. Check back in. We've been here for a little while. Check back in with the neutrality at the sacrum, at the pelvic bowl. Make sure your body hasn't started to just subtly shift. Very likely the shift would be towards the open leg side. But that's not necessarily true for everyone, right? Depending on your left-right asymmetry, your body may tend to pull towards the right. So just ensure you have balance there across the pelvic bowl. And check in with your respiration, particularly ensuring you are getting everything out of your exhale that is possible. We'll give ourselves 30 more seconds on this first side. When it feels appropriate, bring our left knee to neutral. As the left knee comes up, notice if there's a weight shift. All right, think about how neutral feels when we're more in line, and if there was a transition from that externally rotated hip position. And then let's do the same thing. We'll bend the right knee. And once again, just see if there was a shift just from that leg extension. And then when it's appropriate, when you feel balanced and anchored, right leg opens, external rotation, left leg extends down the mat. Once again, arms can be by the sides, they can be a cactus or T, but we want to choose the positioning that's right for our shoulders, and we want to make sure that we're aware of that anterior activation. Make sure it's not shortening our breath. more and more people become aware of this mask vendor, less and less of the people within this little village go about the day without a mask. Tensions within the city seem to fall. Conflicts are almost non existent. Ourselves just 30 more seconds on the second side. And it feels appropriate. Right knee comes back to neutral. Notice if there's a shift in the body weight. Is it more? Is it less on the first side? Eventually, the left knee bends. Noticing if there's a shift. We'll roll to one side or the other just so we can get our props out from underneath us. We can set those to the side. And finding our way back onto our spine, now in a fully neutral alignment. We were in that extended shape for an extended duration. So allow for some time for your body to readjust, to acclimate. Try to feel the body relax laterally so that the softness radiates from the spinal column out towards the edges of your rib cage. And then making sure your knees are in a bent position. So if they're not, let's get there. Let's bring our left thigh in towards our torso. Hands can clasp on the shin or the hamstring. We get this little anterior hip compression on the left side. Trying to feel into that hip capsule, but not trying to lift the sacrum. Trying to stay anchored at the sacrum. And then sliding the hands either to up into the knee pit or on top of the kneecap so that we can start to guide the left knee into some circles. So as we're moving the left knee, we're working with the distal head of the femur. And that distal head movement is rolling that proximal head in the hip joint. And that's what we're looking to do, right? We're just looking to move the femur in the hip joint, exploring kind of the full capacity for approximation as that ball moves within the socket. And then let's reverse our direction. Slow and conscious movement here. Really trying to be delicate in the way we move, adjust. And then eventually we'll come back to neutral. Let that left foot come down and just contact the ground so that we can try to create some symmetry. And then we'll re-lift the left leg and take that left ankle across our right thigh. As that happens, we want the lumbar to be able to relax. We want the left ankle integrity to maintain. So we're not bowing that ankle. We're staying integrated. And then if we're looking for a little more external rotation, we can wiggle that right heel closer to our glutes. Or you could energize the lateral edge of your left thigh, excuse me, away from you. So we're not going to do this with our arms. We want the upper body to be able to relax. So arms by our side, cactus or T. We want to find our way back to a fluid and supportive breath cycle. Check in again at the sacrum to make sure you're balanced. And then let's exhale the bottom of the left foot over to the right side of the body. So we end up in what's a very deep twist. One of my favorite twists, probably my favorite twist. We haven't been here in a while. The keys here, we're getting this whole lateral edge, the left thigh. We want that left kneecap pointing roughly towards the ceiling. We want the left shoulder anchored. And this is a deep lumbar sacrum twist. We'll give ourselves just 30 more seconds here. And then we'll bring that leg structure back towards neutral. Let the left foot come down and mirror the right. And now really feel into that symmetry asymmetry matrix. If you can get the hips to just relax into that space. And then when it feels appropriate, we'll pull the right thigh in towards the torso. Give yourself that little anterior hip compression. We want that sensation of compression first, right in the anterior hip crease. Hands can be on the hamstring or on the shin, whatever's ideal for you. And then eventually we're going to move the hands up towards the knee pit or the kneecap so that we can start some circles with this right hip. Consciously moving through the hip socket. Exploring how that movement of the distal head can help position the proximal head in the joint. And then eventually we'll reverse our direction. This is really about seeking out space and room. And through that search, finding more integration. Maybe one more full cycle. And then we'll let the right foot come back to the ground. You want to feel into balance before we take the right ankle across the left thigh. set for that external rotation, and then your choice. The left heel has the ability to come closer to the glutes, and you have the ability to energize that thigh away from you, but we're not using hand pressure. We're relaxed in the upper body, really at ease in the upper body. Over the course of time in this little village, eventually everyone falls into a cycle. In the morning, they wake up, they get in line to purchase their mask. They wear their mask throughout the day, and then before sunset, they return. And this just becomes a part of the lifestyle in this village. Morning, you wait in line. Evening, you return your mask. Make sure you're level across the sacrum here. No matter how much energy you have going into that lateral edge of the right thigh, we don't want that to be creating asymmetry in the expansion. One late afternoon after a particularly heavy day of rainfall, this young woman is trying to cross what's normally a gentle stream, her baby on her back. And she slips and the waters start to carry her away. When it feels appropriate for you, let's let the bottom of the right foot come down on the left side of the body. So we get into that twist. Feel that rotation. Think about landing and keeping that right knee pointed relatively straight up. And as the waters carry her further and further downstream, more and more people hear about this happening. Word of this starts traveling through town, and people rush out of this village to go help this woman. And more people are piling out of town, grabbing sticks and rods, poles, so that they can try to extend an offering of help as she's carried further and further down this stream. Give yourself 30 more seconds here. And all along the banks of this stream, there are now people just extending things out, and it's always just too short for her to reach. So people start looking for longer and longer things, and this stream gets wider and wider as it gets further away. Worst of all, everyone knows that the stream goes off a huge waterfall. Eventually, we'll bring our knee back to neutral. Let your body settle here. It feels appropriate for you to give yourself any movement, any shifts, any adjustments prior to Shavasana, any dynamic swaying of the hips, any retraction of the thighs, any movements. Offer that to yourself now. And if you feel like you have everything you need, if you feel like you have everything you want, if you're ready for some stillness, then let's drop our way into a shape where we can appreciate Shavasana. And so hours go by as people are trying to help this woman. People are getting more and more desperate, more and more concerned, more and more worried. But eventually, someone finds a fallen tree. They lay it out, and she's able to grab on, and they pull her to safety. And the entirety of this village gathers around this woman that they've saved in a joyous celebration as the sun sets behind the horizon. Just finding your version of stillness this morning. as the sun dropped behind the horizon and the rooftops. The celebration dwindled. People started to make their way back towards town, where they began reaching for the seams of their masks, pulling, but nothing happened. No matter what people attempted, the masks would not come off. First, people laughed, then some started to panic. All around the village, people were tugging at the faces on the or at the skin on their faces, blinking through eyelids that were no longer theirs. Some people shouted, some people were seen crying on the ground. And none of them knew what they actually looked like anymore. And on that peculiar little street, where this most peculiar vendor had sold the masks, they were packing up their tables and their coins and their tents. And the same faces that they had sold these masks with. They'd never worn masks themselves, and they never needed to. They had always known exactly who they were. We start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes, into our wrists and our ankles, up into the knees. Let the hips explore this space. Shoulders move and explore. Eventually, whole body moves and explores. And we'll allow that exploration to bring us back into the seated shape we began in. We'll let our spine get tall, breath get fluid, eyes close. We'll inhale our hands together at heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that anyone who wears a lie too long can forget the shape of the truth? See how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. I'll be back tomorrow night if you want to move. We'll do this again next week. I think we're going to make a little tweak next week since it's a long weekend. Maybe do another Monday night yin restorative. Let me know what you think of that. Love the heck out of you. See you soon. Mwah.